In 1995, a man named MacArthur Wheeler robbed two banks in broad daylight with no disguise. When he was arrested, he was genuinely shocked. He told the police, "But I wore the juice." He believed that rubbing lemon juice on his face would make him invisible to security cameras. This bizarre case led to a fascinating psychological discovery: the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. It is not a matter of ego, but rather a metacognitive inability of the unskilled to recognize their own ineptitude. In other words, they are so incompetent that they don't even know they are incompetent. Conversely, those who are highly competent often underestimate their relative ability. They may assume that tasks that are easy for them are also easy for others. You see this effect everywhere. The amateur musician who is certain they are destined for stardom but can't play in tune. The novice investor who, after a few lucky trades, believes they've mastered the stock market. On the other end, you have the brilliant scientist who is plagued by self-doubt, assuming their groundbreaking work is obvious to everyone else. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a double curse. Not only are the incompetent unaware of their incompetence, but it also prevents them from learning and improving. If you don't know you're doing something wrong, you'll never try to correct it. So how do you avoid this trap? The key is self-awareness and a commitment to continuous learning. Actively seek out constructive criticism from people you trust. Be willing to admit when you don't know something. And perhaps most importantly, be wary of overconfidence, especially in areas where you have little experience. As the philosopher Socrates is believed to have said, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. During World War II, the Allied forces wanted to add armor to their planes to better protect them from enemy fire. They examined the planes that returned from combat and noticed that the bullet holes were concentrated on the wings, tail, and fuselage. The logical conclusion, it seemed, was to reinforce those areas. But a statistician named Abraham Wald had a different and life-saving insight. He argued that the military should add armor to the places where there were no bullet holes, like the engines. His reasoning? The planes they were examining were the survivors. The planes that had been shot in the engines never made it back. This is a classic example of survivorship bias. It is the logical error of concentrating on the people or things that survived, some process, and inadvertently overlooking those that did not because of their lack of visibility. This bias is rampant in the world of business and entrepreneurship. We hear endless stories about college dropouts who went on to become billionaires, like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg. This creates the impression that dropping out of college is a viable path to success. But we never hear about the millions of other college dropouts who did not become successful. Their stories are invisible, so we are left with a skewed and overly optimistic view of the situation. You see it in architecture, where old buildings are often admired for their durability and beauty. We conclude that they don't build them like they used to. But we forget that the vast majority of buildings from that era have long since crumbled and been demolished. We only see the survivors. To counter survivorship bias, you must actively seek out the failures. When you hear a success story, ask yourself, what about the people who tried this and failed? What can I learn from their experiences? By looking at the complete picture, the successes and the failures, you can make a much more informed and realistic assessment of any situation. Imagine you are an expert in a complex field, like a software engineer trying to explain a new program to a customer, or a doctor explaining a medical diagnosis to a patient. You might find it incredibly frustrating when the other person just doesn't seem to get it, no matter how clearly you think you are explaining it. This is the curse of knowledge. It's a cognitive bias that occurs when an individual, communicating with other individuals, unknowingly assumes that the others have the background to understand. Once you know something, it becomes difficult to imagine what it's like not to know it. Your knowledge has cursed you. A famous experiment that demonstrates this involves one person tapping out the rhythm of a well-known song, like Happy Birthday, while another person tries to guess the song. The tapper can hear the melody in their head, and they are often shocked at how poorly the guesser performs. To the tapper, the rhythm is obvious. To the guesser, it's just a series of disconnected taps. The curse of knowledge is a major barrier to effective communication. It is why company websites are often filled with jargon and technical terms that are meaningless to potential customers. It's why teachers can sometimes struggle to explain fundamental concepts to their students. To overcome the curse of knowledge, you need to develop empathy for your audience. Put yourself in their shoes. What do they already know? What are they likely to find confusing? Avoid jargon and use concrete examples and stories to illustrate your points. And if possible, have someone from your target audience review your communication before you send it out. Breaking the curse of knowledge is about building a bridge from your mind to the minds of others. And that requires a conscious effort to remember what it's like on the other side. This is the availability heuristic at work. It is a mental shortcut that relies on immediate examples that come to a given person's mind when evaluating a specific topic, concept, method, or decision. Because we can easily recall words starting with K, we incorrectly assume they are more frequent. This bias is constantly shaping our perception of the world. Think about your fear of a shark attack versus your fear of a car accident. News reports and movies are filled with dramatic and terrifying depictions of shark attacks. This makes them highly available in our minds, leading many to overestimate the risk. However, statistically, you are far more likely to be involved in a car accident on your way to the beach than to be attacked by a shark while swimming. The availability heuristic isn't just about traumatic events. It's also about recent ones. If a colleague just closed a big deal after making a risky move, that success is fresh in your mind. You might be more inclined to take a similar risk, even if it's not a sound decision, because the recent, available information of your colleague's success clouds your judgment. You can't stop your brain from using this shortcut, but you can be more mindful of it. When making a decision, especially a significant one, ask yourself, am I basing this on the information that is most easily available in my mind, or am I basing it on a more complete picture? Take a moment to seek out the less obvious data, the less dramatic statistics, and the less recent examples. You've spent 2 hours and $10 on a movie that is absolutely terrible. You have two choices. Walk out and do something else with your evening, or stay and finish the movie because you've already invested time and money into it. If you choose to stay, you've fallen for the sunk cost fallacy. Sunk costs are resources, time, money, or effort that have already been spent and cannot be recovered. The fallacy occurs when we make a decision about the future based on these unrecoverable past investments, rather than on the current and future costs and benefits. A classic example is continuing to pour money into a failing business project. We've already invested $1 million into this. We can't just stop now. The rational decision would be to assess the project's future prospects, regardless of the money already spent. But the psychological pain of accepting the loss of that $1 million often leads to throwing more good money after bad. This fallacy appears in all areas of our lives. Maybe you are in a relationship that you know has no future, but you stay because you've already invested years into it. Or perhaps you continue to eat a large, expensive meal even when you are full, simply because you paid for it. To combat the sunk cost fallacy, you need to focus on the future, not the past. When faced with such a decision, ask yourself, if I were just starting out today, would I make the same choice? Knowing what I know now, would I still invest in this project, this relationship, or this meal? By reframing the question, you can often break free from the trap of sunk costs and make a more rational decision based on what is best for your future, not what you've already lost.